Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sanjay and today we're going to have a look at what's going on in Australia in terms of the whole crypto space, but specifically about what are large Australian private companies saying, but also what are Australian government organizations saying about this whole topic. And I wanted to do this video because in 2020, during the lockdown, crypto kind of had a really good run. But there wasn't a lot of, I felt like there wasn't a lot of activity coming from official organizations or large private organizations. Then in 2021, especially in the tail end of the year, there's been a few comments from the RBA, CBA has done something, and I just thought, let's just do a bit of a snapshot review of the activities that have happened in 2021 that are relevant in this space. Now, if you're someone who normally follows me and I just generally talk about ETFs and personal finance and investing, and you're wondering, why is he shifting a bit into this space? It's because I think it's an interesting area. And we have to remember, Australia hasn't always been on the Australian dollar. Okay, there was a time when Australia existed, but we used a different currency, specifically the Australian pound. And this was between 1910 and 1966, I believe, when we were using the Australian pound. And there's a whole history around that, which you can have a look at. And then in 1966, we switched over to this Australian dollar with the decimal system that you're now used to. So there was a time when, there's possibly people who are watching this video who could tell us about the time when we weren't using the Australian dollar. And I'm thinking about this whole topic because of something that I often think about that Ray Dalio has said in the past, and I'm pointing to a book off screen, but it's his Principles book, and he's talked about it in recent interviews. It's around, just because something hasn't happened in your lifetime, it doesn't mean it won't happen in your lifetime. So, I'm not saying that we're going to lose the Australian dollar anytime soon, but there's certainly a lot of interest in this whole idea of cryptocurrencies, stable coins, all of that. And looking at it as a curious observer, I'm certainly interested to see where will this all land. But in the meantime, I want to do a bit of a snapshot of what have all these large organizations said. So let's get into it. So let's start with the obvious one that everyone's heard about, which is the fact that Commonwealth Bank of Australia is planning to bring out the ability for you to purchase and trade cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum. And they're going to say up to 10 currencies. Now they're going to partner with a company called Gemini and Chain Analysis. That's what they mentioned in their announcement. And it's going to come out sometime in 2022 with a bit of piloting in between. So if you're on the pilot, by the way, leave a comment below. We're all curious to hear about it. But I think this is going to be an interesting topic, an interesting area, because this is when a large bank is going to add a certain level of legitimacy onto the whole topic of cryptocurrencies and trading it and holding it. And it'll be interesting to see where the other banks fall on it. I know they've all sort of said that they're not planning to do anything in the near term, but again, let's keep an eye out. Let's see what they do. They're obviously going to be watching. And I liked what Commonwealth Bank said was it's a risky area, but it's too risky to also miss out on doing this. So that's the first one. Now, the other topic that interesting came up was randomly Perth Heat, the baseball team over in Perth, has said that they're going to start paying their employees, or they're going to give their employees an option to get paid in Bitcoin. And they're going to allow people to pay in Bitcoin when they come to the various games at the Perth Heat. Now, an interesting thing that the Perth Heat boss actually said was how the introduction of paying people in cryptocurrencies, players and stuff, may allow them to attract more overseas players, because as an overseas player, it must be difficult to turn up in Australia and suddenly have to set up all your bank accounts and start earning money that way. So it's an interesting thing that he pointed out, and that might, in turn lead to more sports teams within Australia opening up Bitcoin and allowing players to be paid in Bitcoin. I haven't seen anything yet, but again, another interesting space to see. Now, we can't talk about cryptocurrency in Australia without talking about the few exchanges that have collapsed, ACX and MyCryptoWallet, both collapsing and having to call in their liquidators now. Now, this goes back to the whole topic that, cryptocurrency purchasing and holding within an exchange can be quite risky, especially if that exchange goes under or gets hacked. So that has occurred, especially going under in Australia, and there's a lot of risks associated with that. So it'll be interesting to see when the CBA thing comes out, how they manage that risk of being hacked or all of that. And that might be where their partners like Gemini and Chain Analysis are being used to help sort of manage a bit of that risk. Now, this whole topic of cryptocurrencies and digital currencies should also get you thinking about, how does money actually work? And the RBA has actually put out a couple of papers, especially in 2018, around money in the Australian economy, and where they covered off on topics like how is money created? How is it measured? How much money is circulating around? And what does the measurement of money tell us about what's going on in the economy? And I think these kind of papers are really interesting to know, to understand a bit more about the mechanics of it, because, you know, we're coming into a space where the Australian dollar is being challenged a little bit, not by a lot, but a little bit in terms of, is it still the currency that people want to use within Australia? I think it's fine for at least, you know, the short and medium term, but it's certainly getting the RBA thinking about this topic. Now, a couple of interesting papers that the Reserve Bank did put out was around retail and wholesale use of a central bank digital currency. Now, the paper that came out on the retail topic covered off an interesting area around how would you design it? What would you consider? And this is where the Reserve Bank of Australia is saying we would bring in a currency in addition to the currencies that we're already issuing, where you could either hold the currency directly with the Reserve Bank of Australia, or they might have an intermediary financial institution, and they kind of talked about what roles the central bank would play in the private sector, and they sort of had a lean towards having a two-tier system. Well, I think they're essentially saying we don't want to get involved with becoming the banker for all of Australia, but we'd have other banks, you know, the standard private banks getting involved with it. They also talked about how would it be account-based or token-based? Would you have like a central registry where all the money sort of managed and moved around? Or would you have tokens where you can kind of send it around to different people? There was also this interesting article, and I'm not sure if this came across your radar, where there was apparently a real estate agent and a particular person was trying to sell their house, and they were willing to take Bitcoin on, and there was some controversy associated with that. Now, to wrap it up, there was this call out from the treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, where he was calling out for a bit more regulation in the buy now, pay later space, but also looking into this cryptocurrency space and what can we do in this space and what controls and things need to be put in place to protect the interest, I guess, of everyday Australians. And also, I think there's going to be something around taxation and making sure everyone's across that. So I think this is going to be an interesting space. Obviously, the fact that the government wants to see what kind of regulation needs to be put in place, and it doesn't look like there'll be anything until the end of 2022 after the election. But again, it'll be keen and curious to see where all this regulation ends up. It'll be great to see it. I think it'll help people stay a bit more safe and protected when they're investing in this space. It might translate to slightly higher costs. Regulation is often backed with companies saying, oh, but this might lead to higher costs for us to run our business. But I think it's a fair enough thing to have if it means that your customers are going to be a bit more safe in these kind of settings when they're investing in these products. So to kind of take a step back and think about it is, how is this relevant to the everyday Australian? I think one thing we have to remember here in Australia is we're very lucky in terms of the stable financial environment we have, the stable currency we have, the stable institutions and regulations we have when it comes to our currency. So for us in Australia, it's a lot like we're looking at all these other people in other countries sort of complaining about their currencies, and it's hard for us to relate because it's all so good here. You know, just like it's hard for us to relate to other people having struggles in terms of their healthcare system because we've got Medicare here. You know, if something's wrong, you can go to a public hospital and get access to the Medicare system, which is fantastic, and you get put into maybe a wait list. And if you don't really want to wait, you can also use your private health insurance. If you have private health insurance, and you can avoid those waiting times. So there's a whole narrative around that, and it's hard for us to maybe relate to people in other countries where they don't have such a good healthcare system. So similarly for us, when we hear about cryptocurrencies, digital currencies, true AUD and AUDT, you'll be forgiven for thinking, is this relevant to me? And you're hearing it in other countries. And I would just say, look, maybe not necessarily for us here in Australia because everything is so stable, but it could be something that we'd have to pay more attention to in the future. We'll see. So hopefully you enjoyed that video. Please do consider subscribing, especially if you're interested in hearing a bit more about this topic. I think in 2022, I'm going to do a few more videos sort of slowly expanding and looking into this adjacent topic around personal finance and investing. I'm going to be coming at it as a curious observer. I'm keen to see where it all lands, especially around large organizations, around government organizations, around regulation. I think it's going to be an interesting space. So please do check out some of my other videos around personal finance, but also I did do a video around ETFs in the crypto space, the two that are currently out, and there'll be more ETFs, I believe, coming out as well. So please do check out these videos, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.